Now I call upon, from the United States of America, the Opposition Spokesman on Enterprise, Deputy Ian Leasing.
Mr. Speaker, sir, members of this House, old white guys hanging over my head. I have a very simple question for the government bench. What do you want as the alternative? You see, this side of the House has wasted their time, and they've wasted yours. Because if you sat there patiently waiting to see what the alternative to capitalism would be, and what was that exactly? Well, let's guess. Because they don't have one, let's provide them with a solution. Since I am the only person in this round today who actually started debating in a time when there was such a thing as the Berlin Wall, let me tell you what communism really is. They speak loosely about abuse and how abuse occurs, as if it doesn't occur in the communist government. And I ask you this question: how comfortable was Khrushchev's bed? She says it didn't matter. Well, it really did matter to the person lining up in Kiev, didn't it? It really did matter to the person in the communes waiting for their food supply. It really did matter to the citizens of the world who relied on communism and said, this will save us. This is going to be... Oh, you're standing up? Guess what? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a product of a privileged education. Since he's never experienced free education, allow me to provide you with some. You see, Mr. Speaker, what really appalls this side of the House... Is someone standing? I thought you were going to do that. No, not when I call you. Mr. Speaker, members of this House, what we are standing for from this side of the House is very simple. Beware the alternative. The alternative is a world where we're locked together in sameness. Now, how about boring would that be? Sir. It would be as boring as watching a bunch of 75 speeches in debate and saying each of those speeches should deserve a first place. That didn't make sense to you? It doesn't to me. Because you know that not everybody speaks at a 75 level. Not everybody receives that level. Sometimes you have a bad partner like Neil did and end up with a 69. Sir, for those of you who didn't take the adjudication exam, guess what? It affected your tournament. Just in the same way that this policy will affect your lives. Because you think you live in a world of sameness, and that sounds great. It's equal. Everyone's on the equal footing. But Mr. Speaker, that in itself is a lie. Because the lie is someone is going to be in the leadership, and that person will hold all the money, no matter what system that is. It's best we put it in the hands of capitalism. Because this is a free market system where we have the ability to control that based on performance, based on that merit.
Sir, considering the fact that the entire opposition is dependent on a neutral state acting as regulator, can you please explain how the state can ever be neutral, considering it's dependent on corporations to produce its wealth?
Sure, why not? Let's look at your educational system that you came from. Okay, the educational system that you came from, that most of us came from, was loosely provided by the whole state. In other words, we support the idea of education. But what happens in the system that you talk about? This neutral state, it seeks to provide that same education for everyone, everywhere. And you say that's a great thing. But with the vast number of people that you're talking about, that value diminishes. So guess what? Your ability to be the best that you can be will be held back by what? by where you are, who you are, when you are. And I know you're saying that. You're saying, well, that sounds relatively unfair. But then again, so is life. What more reflective of that than the kind of society that we really need? In other words, the kind of societies that we live in currently. They say we don't like comfortable stuff, Brooks Brothers, etc., etc. We don't want to have the vestiges of this, drippings of this lavish lifestyle. But that's bullshit. Because if any one of you wants to do that, I dare you, strip down and join the people out there. Join the masses. Now that would be a show. But I assure you, Mr. Speaker, they won't. Why? Because they like being students. They like being students without real direction. Except wanting to attempt maybe another debating competition. Perhaps maybe extending their careers just a little further. Maybe perhaps because I will find myself eventually down the road. Maybe perhaps because that's the best way to self-actualize. That's something that sadly communism could never provide you with. That's sadly something that communism will always hold you down to. Look, the Chinese got wind of this. They learned. They evolved. So they adapted. They're right. Not the way that they suggest. The way that they suggest is to abandon this. In other words, let's say that capitalism has died. Let's just call it a funeral. Let's bring everybody. It's going to be a party. Oh, guess what? It's not, because we can't afford it. So forget your lavish parties. Forget your education. Forget your future, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because you've forgotten your past. How could you? Horrible, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because there are a bunch of kids who have never experienced the world with a real communist threat. In other words, a communist threat that loomed over everybody, that said to everybody, your future may be in jeopardy. The free world was afraid once upon a time. The free world was afraid because they thought the Reds are going to get us. We're going to turn into these robots. We're going to have no real future. We're not going to have the chance to choose what we want for our future because, guess what? The Kremlin will decide for us. With this mentality going on from this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, that's the alternative they're selling. And if you're buying it, you don't have the money to do it, dump their motion.